Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Okay, so this stream is going to be about two incidents that happened in the last 3 days. The explosions near the Crimea airport, and now last night there were explosions in Belarus. I am very surprised by the fact that the Ukrainians have decided to attack both Russia and Belarus. Like, if you think about it, if we take the current war situation, it is the special military operation by Russia into Ukraine. Russia has then used Belarusian military hardware as well as airports and so on to invade Ukraine. And they have used Crimea as well. So they're using their own bases within their own territory as well as the bases inside Ukraine. So it is legitimate military targets. However, the fact that it is a special military operation by Russia means that they are not at war. And Belarus isn't directly involved. They used their own territory, but they didn't send any troops or equipment themselves. So this is an escalation on the from the Ukrainian side. And it really makes me think if, like, thinking about it, Ukraine attacking Russia and Belarus to escalate the conflict. What can they gain from that? What's the benefit in this? And the conclusion I came to is that yesterday I said that the attack on Crimea, because the Belarusian attack hadn't happened yet, the attack on Crimea could mean either of two things. Or this is the same with the controversy about the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. It can mean one of two things. Either the West wants to double down on Russia, and by double down I mean they want to increase their aggression. They want to increase their participation in this war. Or they want to throw Ukraine under the bus. This conclusion emphasized now that Ukraine has attacked both Crimea and Belarus. This shows that Ukraine is now in a position where basically they are either going to force Russia to declare war, and then we will see what NATO responds to that, or yeah, that's basically it. They are trying to force Russia to declare war. That's the conclusion I came up to. And that is very, very, very risky by the Ukrainian side. I think what they want to achieve is that now they have proven that they can hold Russia back, but they are at the breaking point. At any day now, their whole front line can collapse. So they're forcing Russia to put everything they have into Ukraine, because that way they can either gain the support and influence of NATO improved in a way that either they force them to create this no-fly zone or send boots on the ground, all these things that escalate this into a global conflict, or just die, because they're in a situation where they know if it keeps going like this, they'll lose. They don't get enough weapons, they don't get enough support, and Russia isn't even using all they have. They know that eventually, because Russia can just rotate their troops out, they can't. That eventually Russia will just beat them. And they know that the result of Russia beating them is their state ceasing to exist. Even if it still exists on the west side of the Dnieper River, then they will still be in a situation where the GDP is less than half. They have no naval access. They cannot join any European Union or NATO because it's too much of a economic burden, and there's just so many issues that comes with it. And if we compare that to the other option that comes out, or the results that comes from these drastic measures, like attacking Belarus and Crimea, it means that either Russia will come, either NATO will come and help them, or they will completely abandon them. And either way, that is beneficial for Ukraine, because either it puts a quick end to the war if NATO doesn't help, then their lines are going to collapse, or NATO actually helps them, and they will have the ability and opportunity to fight back the Russians. But of course, it will intensify the battles. Hello everyone, thanks for coming to my stream. I started with a little rant on a summary of what thoughts I've made starting the stream. And yeah, escalation from NATO's side, they couldn't have pulled this off on their own. I agree, they definitely received some new weapons or something, or new intel, or an order, or something like this to make them do this, because they wouldn't do this on their own. Hey, Steen Goedemorgen from Antwerp. Okay, so hi from the Netherlands. Okay, so hello to people from the Netherlands. When do you think Russia will start a general offensive in the whole south, like in Zaporizhia, because they have the majority of troops in the south now? Well, I think that this current escalation in Crimea and Belarus are going to change their plans. I think their plan was to start this offensive this week, but it's possible that they are going to be changing their plans now and escalating the conflict, because an attack on Belarus and Crimea is something that is a red line for Russia, and it's definitely an escalation. I can't imagine that they wouldn't escalate the conflict with how things are going. So yeah, if we look at my map, I'll place a new pin around, I think it's right there. And oceans. And if you look at it, this is like, they could have chosen any of the Belarusian airports that is being used, but they chose the one that is closest to Russia without actually attacking Russia. The thing is, they're testing waters by attacking Russia in the most indirect way possible, as Crimea is what Russia annexed in 2014. So it's recently Russian, while Belarus is Belarus. So it's kind of indirectly attacking Russia. Though I definitely think that Russia takes this as a direct attack. But especially with, I keep saying this, but Medvedev, the previous president of Russia, between the two Putin terms, he said that if Ukraine attacks Crimea, then it's going to be war. And honestly, like, how was Belarus attacked? Thank you for watching. There were reported eight explosions or 6 explosions, I don't remember. But either way, it's most likely, it sounds like, I'm not sure yet, there hasn't been any analysis or so on yet, but it's most likely something like the 200 kilometer range HIMARS missiles, 300 millimeter ones, or the ATACMS rocket launchers. They have received new weapons that have much longer range than what they've been using so far. It is so irresponsible they seem to not be able to walk back on their stupid plan to poke the bear. They didn't just poke the bear this time, they went into his nest and punched his face and threw him out of the cave. Did you see all the NATO planes circling in Romania and Crimea? Accidents happened. I watched flight trailer and that was very abnormal. They are at very least directed it. Well, I can tell you, Thor Alp, thank you very much for the donation. That's my first donation ever. So you're the first one. Thank you a lot, and I really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, so now that you mention it, about the same time as the attack on Crimea happened, I saw something very interesting, and it confused me a lot. I live in Denmark, which is here, and while I walked outside about the same time the attack happened, and there were fighter planes flying over my house, which it never has in my whole life. That's the first time I've seen fighter jets over my house. And honestly, it really gives me sympathy with the people who are in a war zone and hear these planes every day. It was scary listening to them. It's like they are flying so far up that you can barely see them, especially with how small they are. And the sound is so loud. It's like, and you can't direct the sound. It's like it comes from everywhere. Honestly, I wouldn't want to be at war. Well, obviously. Anyways, so yeah, I think NATO is definitely involved in both of these attacks. There's no way Ukraine would do them without NATO approval. Uh, I'll take a small 20-second break. You guys can watch this ad, and thanks for support. Okay, guys. NATO planes would be used to guide a Ukraine fighter over Romania and Black Sea and attack with JDAMs. Honestly, I have no idea what they attacked with, and all of the analysis that I've seen doesn't show what they have done. It's like, honestly, Russia is hiding what's happened, and they're still hiding it. I don't understand what is happening. I think Russia doesn't want to escalate the conflict because looking at it, like, Russia is not in a position to fight all of NATO by itself. It needs to do a lot of preparation in case of uh, war with NATO. So it definitely needs a lot of time to make diplomacy, talk with other countries, make deals, and all of these things. You are the most welcome. I have been following a few days for a few of the daily report channels since the start of the war. You are the most objective and unbiased one. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you're helping me. This really helps me continue doing this, and I hope that once I get enough views and so on, that I can do this more often and for different conflicts as well, and generally do this full time. So thank you a lot. The US openly said that they are okay with Ukraine taking back Crimea. It's an extreme provocation. Yeah, the thing is, Ukraine taking back Crimea has been their official goal since the start. They said, or Zelensky said, that his ultimate goal is take back all Ukrainian territory from Russia, including Crimea and the Donbass. And it doesn't look like it's changed despite everything that's changed. With how both the West and everyone else keep supplying weapons and so on, and they keep asking for more and more weapons. At least they stopped asking for the no-fly zone, but I definitely don't think they stopped asking for it in private. Honestly, this situation just keeps escalating and escalating, and the longer the war goes on, the higher there is a risk of escalation, as you know, that's how it's historically been. And these kind of wars are actually very common. If we look at the history, at the Second World War, before the Second World War happened, for example, there was the invasion of Ethiopia by Italy, and Japan invaded North and South Korea, which was Korea back then, and like wars like these happened a lot, despite how the world was. Like at the start of the Second World War, there was not a single minor nation except for here between India and China, and of course China was a bunch of nations. But other than that, was a lot of big empires. But there still was room for some of these wars. If we consider all of NATO as one country, for example, and then Russia and CSTO for one, and then China and their alliance for one. Honestly, what confuses me the most is Russia and China haven't started their own form of NATO, and not by them together necessarily, but each even their own independent one. They are currently challenging the United States in the world by making it multipolar instead of unipolar. And for example, there's the organization of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's called the SCO. It is, well, basically, to my understanding, no one actually understands what this is, because none of the Western countries are allowed to observe, like members. China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Observers: India, Pakistan, Mongolia, and Iran. Afghanistan and Belarus. Dialogue partners: that means these don't appear to meetings. Sri Lanka, Turkey, Cambodia, Azerbaijan, Nepal, Armenia. So no Western country actually knows what's going on. At the very most, Turkey talks with them. But what does that mean? Nothing. So we have something like the SCO, which, like, who knows what they're planning behind the scenes. And if we compare this to NATO, it's much, much more dangerous than whatever NATO ever can be. It has, okay, let's take China, India, and Russia. That's 3 billion people. They have more tanks, artillery, ships, planes, whatever, nukes, more than NATO. Like, us fighting this war is insane. Of course, people say, oh, it's because of their failing policies or whatever. But, like, just do better. Instead of blaming it on other people, start fixing the problems. The issue with Western countries is that they always think about here and now. What can we do now? That's not what you're going to think about. You're supposed to think about what can you do what do you want your country to be 10 years, in 100 years. There's no 100 years if a nuclear war breaks out. Honestly, it's insane. Belarus just claimed airport explosion were an accident, not an attack. Why wouldn't they just admit it was an attack? What are they achieving with denial? That's the thing I'm saying. Both Russia and Belarus are saying it's an accident. But what kind of accidents happen within 2 days of each other, blows up airports? Like, if Russia was an accident, Belarus wasn't. No one goes for a smoke at an airport to blow it all up. It's not like they're smoking inside the ammunition dump or fuel tank. Honestly, it being an accident is bullshit. Imagine NATO as one country. The Turks are part of NATO. Very hard to imagine that. It's honestly, they say that Russia and China don't get along. Well, Germany and the United States don't. Turkey and France, Italy and France, even like their neighbors, they don't get along at all. I think it was like a couple of years ago where Italy banned the French ambassador because they got up in a fight. Like, it's not like you can imagine, you can expect NATO to be united at all, especially in the face of conflicts. If Russia and Poland goes to war, Turkey is the first one to say, I'm out of here. It seems Russia is trying to lose ground in many areas of Ukraine, do you think that there will be popular uprising against Putin if the special military operation starts to lose ground? Honestly, if this is a lot of ground lost, then sure. But I can tell you that the main part of the operation, which was always the goal of Donbass, they are definitely gaining ground. Just yesterday, they pushed to this part of Solidar, and the Ukrainians fell back to this hill. So they essentially own half of Solidar. So I don't think Russia is losing ground. What really matters is these two things. I have no idea how the general population in Russia and Belarus will react to this, or how the. This is so confusing to me because no one reacts directly. They all react indirectly. I think Russia is heavily influenced by China right now. And the Chinese always do this thing where they experience something. For example, how Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, and then they sit together and talk with each other, and they say, "How are we going to respond to this?" They may even plan to respond in 10 years. We don't know. They know. And I think Russia is taking a note from their book. They're going to be talking about this, how we're going to respond to this, and then they make a plan instead of just going gung ho. Oh, you attack Crimea, we're going to declare war. They're going to lay the groundwork, the foundation, to allow them to make the quote unquote best possible reaction to this. Might NATO. Oh. Yeah, might NATO be trying to push Russia into a more hasty offensive like this as some sort of rather than staying short-term strategy? Exactly. Ukraine is learning from the West, and West is short-term strategy. They only think about here and now, which makes it so that they do these mistakes that look good right now, but in a week it's going to be a horrible mistake. Crimea is not outside of Ukraine. Well, on this map it is. Can you see these lines? These are lines that draw a border, and there was border control. So I would say, according to the people there, it is outside of Ukraine. Honestly, Crimea should be independent, away from both of these countries. Only thing these countries bring them is suffering. Obviously not accidents, I agree. Just special cleaning operation, hopefully. What do you think? Will Russia open a new front in Ukraine? I believe Ukraine troops are thin spread and moving another army to west to Kiev, directly north from Russia would break the Ukraine front. I think that I think all the plans Russia had are being rethought and reorganized. They are making new plans instead of what they've had, because they figured now with the situation changing, their plans should change too. Of course, I could be wrong. Is then in Denmark, Crimea is recognized as part of Russia? No, it is recognized as part of Ukraine and occupied territory. That's why we have sanctions against Russia. I do not speak on behalf of the Danish population or government. I speak on my own personal opinion, and my own personal opinion is that Crimea should be independent from both states. I don't think anyone important recognized Crimea. And nah, probably not. Probably Belarus and Armenia and Kenya or something. Sergei Gerasimovich, some Izium ground has been retaken as well as Kharkov and Kherson regions. Not massive loss, but it would be more as weeks pass. Well, they say that every time, but how much has the territory changed since, well, let's say June, because it was the summer offensive? We are mid-August, and this is possibly what they've taken. I would say that generally no changes, no significant changes has happened anywhere Russia hasn't attacked. The most significant changes have been around Bakhmut and Siversk, and generally all of Luhansk being taken. But other than that, there's been no significant changes anywhere. Medvedev is a clown, I agree. He's definitely just someone that Putin tells him what to do and he does. Should Donbass be independent? Well, I mean, in my opinion, if you don't want to be a part of a country, then you're free to do so, but in a way that doesn't involve conflict. Like, Donbass said they wanted to be independent and they just left. I don't know the whole history. I followed this war from 2020, not from 2014. But from what I heard is that the president in Ukraine at that time was deposed, and then a lot of riots and conflicts and so on sprung up from that. So generally, I don't think that it was handled the correct way. I think they should have found a diplomatic solution. I heard Russia is grouping some troops in northeast parts of Ukraine. Is it true? Well, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard the same, so possibly. Front lines collapse. It can happen anytime, honestly. What I think is that it could happen anytime. Ukrainians have lost so many troops and equipment, but we don't get the whole story. We don't know anything that happens on the front line because we are sitting here in our homes. And 900 distribution, what is false? All succession are illegal, but must be paid. I think that if you want to, if a group, a population group, doesn't want to be a part of a country because that country doesn't represent its views, then in a democratic sense, it makes sense for them to have some kind of self-governance. Like at the very least, give them autonomy. But the way the Ukraine handled it was very hard-handed, and I disagree with that. Ukraine depends on eastern areas for revenue, so can't give them up whether the people like it or not. Well, yeah, you see, that's greed. And greed, I think everyone agrees, it's one of the, if you're Christian, one of the cardinal sins, or whatever it's called. So yeah, greed is not a good thing, and well, if a rich part of Russia wants to succeed, or for example Chechnya and so on, they wanted to succeed from Russia. Russia didn't allow them. Well, I also disagree with the hard-handed methods Russia used on the Chechens. I think that, well, of course it would be a mess if everything, but if stuff like that happened. But I think the general solution is to just let people live in peace. Don't force these autocratic rules on them. Just let them figure out for themselves what's best for themselves. So who knows what's best for you? Yourself or the country you live in? Of course yourself. The country you live in doesn't spy on you. Hopefully not. Looks around for cameras. They're gonna have to find some new industry because they are not getting the East back. Yeah, they're gonna have to get some new industry because if they lose all of Novorossiya, then they have nothing left. Pretty sure like their biggest steel industries, their fishing, grain, all of that. Most of the industry of everything is down here in the south. Almost all except the Velvet Revolution. What's the Velvet Revolution? I'm sorry, I don't know about that. If you had to live in one country near Russia, you'll have another opinion. No, I don't think I would have another opinion. And I think that's because I'm guessing you're talking about the succession part where Russia just takes a part of your country and you're like, well, USA is now funding Ukraine's army and government 100%. How long will the US be willing to pay for Ukraine over the coming winter? Well, the reason the US can pay for all of this is because they just make money out of thin air. Countries are slowly moving out of the reliance on the US dollar, as we're seeing how India, even Latvia, started paying Russia in rubles. So as the more sanctions are imposed on Russia, then people will just pay in other currencies. And we're seeing less and less countries relying on the dollar for international transactions, which means that the US can't just continue printing everything they want. So it's eventually going to collapse. We're Romanian too. Very true about the freedom. Should look at Cossack history. They lived like that. Exactly. If you look at Cossack history, then you will find the perfect example of how you can live, where everyone is respected and can live as if they are in their own country without being in their own country. Czechoslovakia splitting up was the way to resolve a crisis like the one in the Ukraine. Exactly. We have an example here, Czechoslovakia. We don't see anyone in Czechia or Slovakia saying, well, this was a horrible mistake, now we are separated. No, they're both happy with it. I don't understand why, if the Ukrainians in Western Ukraine hate the Donbass Ukrainians so much, then why won't they just split up? If they can't live beside them, then move or split up the country. If that keeps people from killing each other, from killing their previous neighbor, from their friend's cousin or whatever, then I am willing to pay that price if I was Ukrainian. Zelensky would never consider resolving it that way. You see, Zelensky really confuses me. His whole idea was, oh, I'm going to solve this civil war. I'm going to give autonomy to Donbass. Well, yeah, he successfully gave Luhansk autonomy so far. 4 times more GDP per capita in Russia versus Ukraine. Ukraine was a failed state because as soon as you see, Russia and Ukraine were both failed states once the Soviet Union dissolved. The difference is, in the year 2000, Putin went up and said, I'm going to fix this failed state. And he did. He successfully fixed a state that was rotten to the core to be now under autocratic rule. Sure, but it's way better than it was in the 90s. You can ask anyone in Russia who lived through the 90s and they'll tell you, right now, it's better. You can ask anyone in Ukraine, they'll say it's worse. Not a single person will say war was better than what was in Ukraine in the 90s or the 2000s. They still say that there's a brighter future ahead because they've promised EU, they've promised NATO, and all of this crap. That's never gonna happen. Ukraine is corrupt to the core. It's as corrupt as Russia was in the 90s. There's no way the EU will accept them. They already went over a line when they accepted Poland. There's no way to. It's impossible. There's no way. It's just false promises. Does Ukraine have enough gas and oil to support their army when the winter comes? I think it will be in a mess. Well, currently they're being supported by the West. They're sending oil and gas over the border and stuff like that. They'll probably continue doing so until they run out. Scotland and England are also looking like breaking up now. Exactly, that's my point. The West keeps being the most hard-handed about these things. Scotland had their referendum in 2014, I think, or whatever it was, and it barely failed. Like there was probably 48% voted for succeeding. And since then, they wanted to hold a new referendum because of Brexit. Now, they always get denied. They're not allowed to. Why? Why aren't they allowed to democratically vote on being independent based on current circumstances? Like, Brexit is not a small thing. They left the EU. That's huge. That's an economic union. And they're just not allowing them to go their own way. To be honest, if the Donbass is split from Ukraine, the rest of Ukraine has no chance to survive economically. This is one of the reasons for separating movement, because the East paid for the West. Yeah, I also disagree with that. We don't see evidence of that. I can say that the East definitely paid for Kiev by the fact that they are paying a lot of taxes because of their revenue, and that the fact that most of the land is state owned, which means that all of the iron, all of the oil, all of the gas that they get from there is going to the state, not the people who live there. So it's funding the whole state. It's like kind of taking money from one place and spreading it everywhere. Kind of quote unquote Robin Hood. If you know the story about that, stealing from the rich, giving it to the poor. So instead of, well, it's basically stealing it from rich lands and spreading it over the poor lands. What do you think about Poland? There's a theory that Poland is going to occupy western part of Ukraine. I have heard that a lot, and that I've heard a lot of theories, but most of it is just conspiracy. There's no like actual evidence of anything. But if they do, their map would look so ugly. So I hope they don't. Like, imagine if you guys know German history. First, in the Second World War, they owned about this part, and then there was the gap here around Danzig, which is now Gdansk, and then they had an enclave here, which was whatever, and then they annexed Austria and they annexed the Sudetenland. That was so ugly. I'm so happy I didn't live at that time, because imagine an enclave and oh, it's so dumb. And when they took all of it, it's like they had a big belly. Really represents the German culture of having a beer belly. I've seen it debunked on pro-UA media. Yeah, I don't think it's true. Also, if you guys don't know, Poland and Ukrainians, sure, historically, like 200 or 300 years ago, they were one country. But before that, or after that, it's been like, you can still see today, as a result from the First World War, where Russia owned about this part. This part of Poland disagree with the rest of it, the areas that Germany occupied, because they lived in such different societies for a long time. They have different values, they have different a lot of things. So even today, we see a difference between Eastern Poland and Western Poland, and Northern Poland and Southern Poland. So of course, we see a huge difference between East and West Ukraine. So West Ukraine is closer to this than Poland is to West Poland, but they already have enough issues as it is. They don't need to add more. This is just going to be extra baggage. Russia take Odessa. They want to, and they will probably not stop before they do. I would argue that Ukraine has already become a de facto part of NATO. US controls NATO and pays for that privilege. Well, you could say this so, like, in a way, in a twisted way, yeah, sure. But I would say you're definitely not an equal member. This person can honestly think that a referendum in Kherson and Zaporizhia during wartime is legal? Well, obviously not. Not during wartime. If it was in a peaceful matter that was independent from a conflict, then sure, I would say that it's legal. But during wartime, it's clearly like, how much of the population is even still there? I don't know that. And I'm not with the UN or anything. I don't say what's legal or illegal. But my personal opinion is that if you're at war with someone and you can uh, implement something and you can defend that decision, like if Russia takes Zaporizhia and all of it to the border and defends that, then they can say whatever they want with it because now they own it, like it or not. It's a fact because they are military strong enough to hold it. But if it isn't, if they're just making a referendum with the current borders, then of course not. And they have no claim to this. So was no RF and Martians wants to occupy Russia. Well, if Martians exist, they will probably want to occupy Russia. This Königsberg, yeah, Königsberg, thank you. Jeldiru, who says it's a war? What are you talking about? Which conflict is a war? Annexations are hard, yes, they are. Gaslighting and form of psychological torture that blames the victim. Ukraine will survive economically if it keeps Odessa. Yes, it will be able to survive. And I was on what's it called, Matsuri Geopolitics yesterday, and he mentioned something very interesting. He said that if Ukraine keeps Odessa, then they can make some kind of shipping deal where uh, shipping from the Suez Canal goes up through the Bosphorus Strait, arrives at Odessa, and then they can just ship into Poland and through the Baltic Sea or whatever, so that they can make some kind of connection instead of sailing all the way around. They can just go through, which I think, well, that makes sense. But can't Romania also do that? Can't Bulgaria also do that? Well, it's easier through here because there's no mountains here. Then you can say, okay, that goes through here. Well, that's true. Well, there's a lot of options generally, but Odessa is a big port and the infrastructure doesn't take 2 seconds to build. Do you think that Belarus will join the war soon so Russian troops can attack from the Belarusian border? They can attack from the Belarusian border without them being at war because they did so at the start of the war. More chance of Turkey stepping up than Belarus, I think. I don't think anyone will get involved with this war. If one gets involved, everyone gets involved. You can't stop the escalation if a country involves itself within it. Yeah, I think discussions are already happening. We just aren't told about it. Do you think that Russia will run out of ammo? Russia will run out of ammo when hell freezes over. That's what I'm gonna say. If anyone had read about how much ammunition the Soviet Union has, then you would agree with me. They had a lot, and that isn't going to change. Anyways, I need to get a cup of water. I'm going to run an ad. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back. Be right back. All right. What about the North Korean offer to give Russian 100,000 troops? Join the European pledge. Would Russia accept this? Russia would accept it if they expect the war to last another 2 years. Anything less than 2 years, then it's highly unlikely. Why is that? Because if North Korean fighters have to go to Ukraine, they have to go through all of Siberia with all their ammunition, all of their equipment, and so on. That would take a lot of months. And if not, and they just send the people and then Russia needs to arm them, then they also need training in the new equipment and so on. It's not an easy task. So generally I would say probably not unless the war lasts for 2 or more years. Russia needs to open a new front in the south because they are moving too slowly in Donbass to wait until they will have captured it. Honestly, Russia is not in a hurry because so far in the short term it's going to hurt the West more than it hurts Russia. In the long term it's going to hurt Russia more, but that's why they can extend this war until it starts hurting, because that way they can delay the hurt, if we can say that. Even Ukraine has some ammo left. Yes, no, actually, if Ukraine didn't receive anything from NATO, they would be out by now. But that's mostly because the Russians have used a lot of multi-launch rocket systems since the start of the war, and it has continued for a long time. So what we see the HIMARS doing, Russia has been doing for 6 months. Ukraine was producing 2 million artillery shells for Russia in 2014, plus what Russia was making. Yep. If Ukraine can make 2 million artillery shells in 1 year, then Russia can make much more. I like this guy. If you like me, thank you very much. I appreciate it. No way Russia will invade or attack an official NATO member at this stage. That would be crazy. I agree. It is highly unlikely that Russia would invade any NATO country. Ukraine would have kept all this land if they hadn't listened to Boris and Biden when they had peace talks in March. I think rather than Biden, I don't think Biden wanted this war. I think Boris Johnson wanted it, and I think Poland wanted it. And I think the Baltics wanted it as well. Ukraine. Hello from Germany. Hello from Denmark. As a Russian in Crimea, any knowledge about Odessa massacre? I cannot talk about that. That is very controversial. No such thing as moving too slowly in this case. There are extreme fortifications, no use in sacrificing troops by stalling prematurely wars, artillery, Napoleon. Someone did an analysis on Russian losses. Actually, if you look at this, wait a second. The reports Allied forces captured Ivano-Darivka. Interesting. Did someone say that Russia was walking too slowly? This is 2 minutes ago. I'll put a question mark because it's only one source. But there you go. If you thought Russia was moving too slowly, congratulations, they moved. Oh yeah, Russian casualties. You see, if you look at this, 88, TV News, BBC News Russia. BBC News Russia. Wait, how do you access the site? Anyways, someone did an analysis, but basically in a nutshell, wherever it is, here. Okay, so they have estimated about 5,185 killed Russian soldiers, that's by name. So they have confirmed this by 28th of July. So the way this analysis is going on, at the very start of the war, when they were attacking Kiev and so on, the first months, a lot of people were dying every day. But the graph has been going down and is still going down despite the fact that the war keeps intensifying, and that is because the way Russia is fighting right now is a lot of artillery, and then they move in once the everything has been blown up. So basically, in a nutshell, Russia is fighting safely to avoid the most casualties possible, while at the same time, Ukrainian casualties is out of this world. Let's see, what are the questions? What do you think of will gain ground till the end of this year? Well, if we talk about, I would say, and when we talk about a year, we need to talk about it in the fact that the invasion started 24th of February. So by the next 24th of February, I think Russia will have gained a lot of ground. And by a lot, I mean at least one or two whole areas. For example, taking Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Kryvyi Rih or Mykolaiv, or as one of these. Or well, this whole south, for example. I think that's about how much they will have taken by the end of February 24th, 2023. And I think that's because analyzing the way they fight and everything that's been going on, that's the most realistic. As we see, the Russians, as I just mentioned, Russia is barely taking any casualties, while Ukraine is losing a lot. And I'm not saying this as a pro-Russian. I'm saying that even from pro-Ukrainian sources, you see Ukrainians say, on the soldiers on the field say, this is hell. We have Zelensky saying this is hell because it's hell for them. That's how horrifying fighting a war where artillery shells rain down on you 24/7. Slow cooking and slow warfare at the best, only patience, and China wanted it. I think the US wanted it the most considering their influence in NATO and Ukraine. Poland seems to be having some second thought now. Okay, so about who wants the war? I think Poland and the Baltics want the war because they have animosity towards Russia, and they also have this kind of, well, Poland is not like the rest of the Western countries. The same with the Baltics. They aren't the same. They've been under Soviet rule for a long time. And even before that, they have history of being occupied just like Russia. They have this kind of feeling that if they just stay calm, then eventually someone is going to be the aggressor against them. They want to change that by being the aggressor themselves. So they have this kind of feeling that we want to defend ourselves, and the best defense is offense. If we get rid of all threats, for example, Russia, then we will be safe forever. So some kind of insecurity they have. Ukraine will have hundreds of thousands of wounded men after this is all over, which will be a disaster for its economy. Ukraine's demographic already is horrible. With all their young people being soldiers, it's going to be even worse. I think after this war, unless Russia and Ukraine starts having babies, and I mean a lot of babies, then their countries are going to collapse purely because of their lack of babies. Like Ukraine demographics. Look at this. This is horrible. Like, this is like disastrous for any country. Much less one country that's been half the size and has recently been at war with these people right here. Like, these are the people at war. Imagine cutting this in half. They have no one. What are they gonna do? Are you pro-Russia or pro-Ukraine? I'm not pro anyone. I want this war to end so that people stop suffering, and I want people to have babies to solve this issue. What is the war status in terms of manpower number? I think Russia is probably around 200 to 250,000 soldiers, while Ukraine has about 300,000 soldiers. 2 whole oblast words of land? Yes. Pro-Russian, he said he liked to win, to be part of winners. See previous live stream. Yes, I did say I wanted to have the feeling of I'm winning, but not in the sense that I support the Russians or the Ukrainians. I don't support anyone. I'm just following the perspective of the winner. Because if I was following the perspective of Ukraine, for example, my mental health would not be able to handle it, as I would just be sad all the time because of what the perspective brings you. So most sources I follow is Russian sources because they're usually easier to look at without breaking down mentally. Do you think there will be any offensives when the ground freezes? If so, where will they be targeted? Well, you have to see it in a way where if you look very closely, no one can drive through this if it's frozen or not. So they will take these areas while this area is mud anyways, because then they will just continue taking the roads, which is the logical thing to do. However, in these areas, it's very easy to traverse through when the ground is hard. So if they don't attack right now, they'll probably leave it until like late, as in December or November even, before they start attacking. So if you look at flat grounds, then that's when the ground is hard. If you look at hills and valleys and rivers, then it's when the road is soft. In my opinion, the Baltics don't need to worry about Russia as long as they treat Russians in their countries well. Well, the issue is that they joined NATO, and NATO is a threat to Russia, and Russia is a threat to NATO. That's why they can't agree. No matter how they treat anyone, they don't care. That's not the issue. The issue is that they are seen as a threat. So they see the other side as a threat as well. They hardly can match the Ukrainians. I'm moving to Ukraine after. Hahaha, true, I can't imagine. Well, I hope that if you move to Ukraine, you help rebuild the country, because there's going to be needing a lot of help there. What do you think about the possible Serbia-Kosovo conflict? Well, honestly, Kosovo has no chance at all to do anything. It's going to be steamrolled. The only thing is it's full of, I think, Kosovo, not the country. I think it's very tough terrain to, yeah, basically a fortress. That is going to bring the most issue, but in terms of combat ability and so on, they have no chance, and Russia will definitely support Serbia, which they historically have. So most likely we'll see if Serbia and Kosovo goes to war again, then Serbia will win, as they would have the last time they were at war, except for NATO interference. And again, NATO interferes anywhere Russia is interested in, because they are seeing each other as enemies. If you watched my stream at Masarin Geopolitics, you could see my final threat assessment by the Heritage Foundation, which I can actually show you. heritage.org/military. It's a non-governmental only annual assessment of US military strength. They have a part here that says an assessing threats to US vital interests and Russia, and then you can go all the way to the bottom to the conclusion. Threats: Russia, behavior, aggressive, capability, formidable. They see it as an aggressive country that has formidable strength, mainly because of their nuclear arsenal, but also because of the strength of the land army. They have the ability to take on all of NATO in a land battle, and if they lose that, they nuke. So it's a formidable enemy with aggressive tendencies. Essentially, NATO wants to cut off Russia whenever it acts in its own interest, which is why we see the support for Ukraine. It has nothing to do with support for Ukraine. It has everything to do with antagonism to Russia. What do you think about the possible survey? Yes, I will have 5 wives and 4 kids each. Well, then you will definitely help their demographic issue. Do you think Russia can currently defend Armenia if it gets invaded by Azerbaijan and Turkey? If Turkey gets involved, 100%. If Azerbaijan only attacks it, then Nagorno-Karabakh they will not fight for, but Armenian core territory they will. If Armenia and Azerbaijan go into full war where they attack each other, then I think yes, Russia will get involved. Unless that happens, where it's just a regional conflict on the Nagorno-Karabakh, then I don't think Russia cares who owns it. Armenia is... Wait. Armenia... I don't remember if Armenia is part of it. I think it is. Yeah, Armenia is part of the CSTO, so they can just ask Russia. If they ask Russia, Russia's obliged to help them, just like in NATO Article 5. I think that skirmish is everyone gaining leverage. I think that skirmish is Azerbaijan getting cocky because they have gotten weapons from Ukraine, from Turkey, and they're being buffered up by Turkey, similar to how Ukraine decided, oh, we're going to fight Russia instead of listening to it because they thought because of their NATO support they could fight Russia. So Azerbaijan thinks, oh, I can just fight Armenia. Doesn't. take into account that Armenia is part of the CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, which has an article similar to Article 5 where they are obliged to defend. So I wonder how Azerbaijan is going to fight Russia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Armenia. Azerbaijan is currently in the same position as Armenia after the First Karabakh War. Yes, basically. I agree with that assessment. Now, let's look a bit on Twitter to see if there's any other updates. Other than that, I'll probably end the stream soon. I'll give you another ad. Yeah, okay, there's nothing new. Okay, that's probably gonna be the end of this stream. Thanks for watching and have a great day, everyone. I really appreciate the one donation. Thank you a lot, Sor Alp. I really appreciate your support. And thanks everyone for watching. Have a great day and goodbye.